It's almost 3 in the morning. The room is quiet, but your mind isn't. You're staring at the ceiling, replaying tomorrow in your head like a countdown timer. Fees, rent, that laptop that's been overheating for weeks, the exam form you still haven't filled because you're not sure you can afford it, the part-time job that might cut your hours next month. If you're a student, this isn't imagination. This is routine. Most students don't stress because they're bad with money. They stress because one small problem can collapse their entire system. A cracked phone screen isn't just annoying, it's a crisis. A delayed payment isn't inconvenient, it's panic. When you're a student with no savings, every decision feels dangerous. You don't choose what's best. You choose what's safest. You check prices before checking interest. You say, maybe next time, so often it becomes a habit. You avoid opportunities, not because you don't want them, but because you can't afford the risk. This is what financial survival mode looks like. And survival mode does something scary. It shrinks your world. You stop thinking long-term. You stop experimenting. You stop believing you have control. Now, here's a question most students never ask themselves. What if there was a number, not a fantasy amount, not millions, just a realistic number that switches this anxiety off, a number that turns panic into calm, fear into calculation, reaction into choice? Because the truth is, most financial stress isn't about income, it's about margin. And for students, the first real margin begins at one specific milestone, $10,000. Not because it makes you rich, but because it changes how your mind works. And once your mind changes, everything else follows. Part 1. Life as a student without savings. Let's zoom in on what life actually looks like for a student with no savings. Not the Instagram version, the real one. You walk into a grocery store with a list, but you don't really follow it. Instead, your eyes jump straight to the price tags. You're not choosing food based on what's healthy or what you enjoy. You're choosing based on what hurts the least. At the checkout counter, your heart rate slightly increases as the total appears on the screen. Not because you expect it to be huge, but because you're afraid it might be slightly higher than you planned. That constant calculation never turns off. When friends suggest going out, you don't think, "Do I want to go?" You think, "Can I afford to say yes?" And when the answer is no, you don't say the truth. You say you're busy. You say you're tired. You say maybe next time. Slowly, without realizing it, money starts deciding your social life. Now think about emergencies. Your phone falls. The screen cracks. For some people, that's an inconvenience. For a student with no savings, it's a multi-week problem. Do I fix it now? Do I wait? Do I put it on a credit card? Do I borrow? This is the exhausting part of being broke as a student. Not the lack of money, but the constant decision-making under pressure. Every unexpected expense forces you to reshuffle your entire month. One problem creates 3 new ones, and because of that, you start living defensively. You avoid risks. You avoid change. You avoid anything that could destabilize your already fragile balance. You don't apply for that internship in another city. You don't take that course that costs money up front. You don't experiment, not because you're lazy, not because you lack ambition, but because you can't afford to fail. This is what people mean when they say, money limits your options. It's not dramatic. It's subtle. It shows up in the opportunities you never take, and the version of yourself you never get to test. And here's the most dangerous part. After living like this for long enough, you start believing this is just how life works, that stress is normal, that anxiety is permanent. But it's not, because there's a point where this entire experience shifts. Not overnight, not magically, but clearly. And that shift doesn't happen when you earn more money. It happens when you finally build a buffer, and that buffer begins at $10,000. Part 2. The psychological switch at $10,000. The moment a student crosses $10,000, something strange happens. Not externally. Nothing in their daily routine suddenly looks different. They still attend the same classes. They still live in the same room. They still think twice before buying expensive things. But internally, everything shifts. The first change isn't confidence, it's silence. The constant background noise in your head, the one that's always calculating, always worrying, finally turns down. And there's a biological reason for this. When money is tight, your brain stays in a state of alert. Stress hormones like cortisol remain elevated because your body believes you're in danger. Even small financial uncertainty triggers the same response as a real threat. That's why broke students feel tired even when they're not doing much. Their brains are working overtime, trying to prevent disaster. But when you see 5 figures in your bank account for the first time, your nervous system receives a signal it hasn't felt in years. You're safe for now. This doesn't make you reckless. It makes you calm, and calm changes how you respond to problems. Think about something simple. Your laptop suddenly stops working. Before $10,000, this thought hits instantly. How bad is this going to ruin my month? Your mind jumps straight to consequences. After $10,000, the thought is different. Okay, this is annoying. Let's fix it. Same problem. Completely different emotional response. That shift from panic to problem solving is one of the most underrated benefits of savings, because panic shuts down logic. Calm activates it. This is why students with savings make better decisions, even outside money. They study better because they're not distracted. They perform better in interviews because they're not desperate. They communicate better because they're not carrying constant tension. And here's something most people don't expect. Seeing $10,000 in your account doesn't make you feel rich. It makes you feel grounded. For the first time, your future doesn't feel like a fragile glass structure that could shatter from one wrong move. It feels adjustable, and that's powerful. Because when your mind is no longer consumed by survival, it starts asking different questions. Not, how do I get through this month? But, how do I improve my situation? What decisions help future me? What risks are actually worth taking? This is where students begin to think strategically instead of emotionally. And that's the real switch. Not money, not comfort, mental space. $10,000 doesn't solve every problem, but it gives your brain room to breathe. And when your brain can breathe, it starts working for you instead of against you. This is the point where students stop reacting to life and start steering it. Part 3. How risk and confidence change for a student. Before a student has savings, risk feels terrifying. Not because students are afraid of hard work, but because failure is expensive. One wrong decision can mean dropping a semester, taking on debt, asking parents for money again, or losing months of progress. So most students don't take risks. They stay in the same routine, the same part-time job, the same low-pay internship. Not because it's good, but because it's familiar. Now watch what happens after a student builds $10,000 in savings. Risk doesn't disappear. It becomes calculable. You're no longer asking, what if this goes wrong? You're asking, if this goes wrong, can I recover? And that single question changes everything. A student with no savings cannot afford recovery. A student with savings can. So confidence grows. Not loud confidence, not ego, but quiet confidence, the kind that lets you speak up. You finally ask your professor for guidance instead of staying silent. You apply for internships you thought were out of your league. You negotiate a stipend instead of accepting whatever is offered, because you're no longer begging for approval. You have time, and time is leverage. This is something broke students never have. They say yes too quickly. They accept bad conditions. They settle, because they're scared the opportunity will disappear. But students with savings move differently. They pause. They evaluate. They walk away when something doesn't make sense. And this shows up clearly in interviews. A student who needs the job radiates urgency. A student who wants the job radiates confidence. Interviewers feel that difference immediately, not consciously, emotionally. Now let's talk about one of the biggest shifts. Self-investment. Before savings, spending money on yourself feels irresponsible. A course? Too expensive? A certification? Maybe later? A conference? Impossible. But after $10,000, your thinking changes. You stop seeing money only as something to protect. You start seeing it as something to deploy carefully. You ask, will this skill increase my future options? Will this investment pay back over time? That's a massive mindset upgrade, because this is how growth actually happens. Not through motivation, through permission. Savings give you permission to try. And here's the most important part. This confidence spills into every area of life. You communicate better. You're less defensive. You stop over-explaining yourself, because deep down, you know, if this doesn't work, I'll be okay. That knowledge is priceless. Not because it makes you reckless, but because it makes you bold enough to move forward. And that's the difference between students who stay stuck and students who start accelerating. Part 4. The identity shift. Becoming a student who saves. Up to this point, we've talked about money, stress, confidence, and risk. But now we reach the most important change of all, because saving $10,000 doesn't just change what's in your bank account. It changes who you believe you are. Most students think the hardest part of saving money is earning it. They believe if they just made more, everything would be easier. But that's not true. The hardest part isn't earning money. It's becoming the kind of person who doesn't immediately spend it. Most students approach saving like a punishment. They cut expenses aggressively. They say no to everything. They live in restriction mode, and eventually, they burn out. They tell themselves they'll start again next month, next semester, next year. But students who reach $10,000 don't think this way. They don't see saving as something they're doing. They see it as who they are becoming. This is a critical difference. Because when saving is temporary, every sacrifice feels painful. But when saving is part of your identity, it feels natural. You don't feel deprived. You feel intentional. At some point in the journey, something clicks. You stop asking, "Can I afford this?" and start asking, "Is this worth delaying my future?" That question alone rewires how you spend. You begin to notice patterns you never saw before. How small purchases repeat. How convenience slowly drains your account. How emotional spending disguises itself as deserved. And once you see these things, you can't unsee them. This is why the first $1,000 is brutal. It requires discipline, awareness, and constant effort. You have to say no repeatedly. You have to fight old habits. But the second $1,000 is easier, because now you're not just saving money. You're reinforcing an identity. By the time you reach $5,000, something fascinating happens. Saving stops feeling like work. It becomes automatic. You move money without thinking. You plan ahead naturally. You feel uncomfortable when you don't save. And this is the point where most students realize something shocking. The version of themselves who couldn't save no longer exists. They didn't become rich. They became disciplined. And discipline outlives money. This is why people who save $10,000 once can do it again, even if they lose it, even if life resets them. Because the skill isn't in the bank account. It's in the mindset. A student who reaches $10,000 has already won the hardest battle. They've proven to themselves, I can delay gratification. I can plan long-term. I can keep money. And those three abilities matter more than any income level. This identity shift doesn't just affect money. It affects how you study, how you work, how you think about your future. You stop chasing quick wins. You start building systems, and once that shift happens, going back is almost impossible. Part 5. What $10,000 actually protects a student. From up until now, we've talked about mindset, psychology, and identity. But let's ground this in reality. What does $10,000 actually do for a student? Not in theory, not in motivational speeches. In real life, the biggest misconception about savings is that it's meant to be spent. It's not. The real power of $10,000 is that most of the time, you don't touch it at all. You simply know it's there. And that knowledge changes everything. Let's start with the most common student emergencies. Technology. Your laptop dies. For a student without savings, this is a nightmare scenario. Classes stop. Assignments pile up. Stress explodes. You scramble to borrow. You delay repairs. You fall behind. But with $10,000 saved, it's still annoying, but it's not paralyzing. You fix the problem quickly and move on. No spiral, no panic. Now think about medical expenses. Unexpected doctor visits, tests, urgent care. Most student medical emergencies don't cost tens of thousands. They cost hundreds, sometimes a few thousand. Without savings, these bills create long-term debt and anxiety. With savings, they're handled, and that difference matters more than people realize. Next, transportation. Car repairs are one of the biggest financial traps for students. A brake issue, a transmission problem, a sudden breakdown. For someone living paycheck to paycheck, this can derail an entire semester. For someone with $10,000, it's an inconvenience, not a life event. Then there's job instability. Internships end. Part-time hours get cut. Stipends get delayed. This is terrifying when you have no buffer. But $10,000 creates time. Time to look for better options. Time to be selective. Time to breathe. 3 to 6 months of survival space, depending on your expenses. That's huge. Now here's the key insight most students miss. The goal of $10,000 isn't to cover every possible disaster. It's to cover most of them. And most financial disasters that trap students fall well below this number. This means once you hit this milestone, you're no longer fragile. Life can hit you, and you can absorb it. And when you're no longer fragile, you stop living defensively. You stop hoarding energy for emergencies. You stop constantly preparing for collapse. That mental shift frees up something incredibly valuable: focus. You can finally focus on skill building, career planning, long-term goals, instead of constantly firefighting. But here's the part most people don't talk about. $10,000 doesn't just protect you from bad situations. It creates good ones. Opportunities almost always require upfront investment, a certification, a relocation, a training program, a portfolio project. Without savings, these opportunities stay theoretical. With savings, they become real options. You don't automatically say yes, but you can finally say, "Let me think about it." And that's the real gift: choice. $10,000 gives a student the ability to choose, instead of being forced. And that's why this number changes everything. Part 6. How $10,000 unlocks opportunities and accelerates a student's life. There's a moment most students never notice. It's the moment when an opportunity appears and quietly disappears. Not because it wasn't good, but because it required money up front. A course that costs a few $100s. A certification that improves your resume. A conference where real connections are made. A move to another city for a better internship. For students with no savings, these opportunities live in the category of would be nice, but not realistic. And after a while, students stop even looking for them, because it hurts less to ignore opportunity than to constantly remind yourself you can't afford it. But when a student has $10,000 saved, something powerful happens. Opportunities stop feeling dangerous. They start feeling evaluatable. You don't rush into them. You don't blindly spend. But you finally get to ask the right question. Does this increase my future options? That question alone changes everything. Here's a psychological truth most people miss. Money doesn't just buy things. It buys access. Access to better learning. Access to better people. Access to better environments. A broke student avoids spending $50 on a networking event. That $50 feels heavy. A student with savings sees that same $50 differently. Not as an expense, but as a potential multiplier. And this is where acceleration begins. Because once fear leaves the equation, students start investing strategically. They pay for tools that save time. They learn skills that compound. They place themselves in rooms they couldn't access before. And here's the most important part. They're willing to try and fail. A student without savings avoids failure at all costs. Failure is expensive. A student with savings understands something crucial. Failure is feedback. This willingness to experiment creates momentum. They test ideas. They take side projects seriously. They explore paths that were previously off limits. And suddenly their career trajectory bends upward. Not because they're smarter, not because they got lucky, but because they finally had the capacity to explore. This is why two students with the same degree can end up in completely different places. One played defense their entire academic life. The other built a safety net and played offense. And here's a paradox that surprises people. Students with savings often progress faster, even if they earn less initially. Why? Because they're not trapped by desperation. They don't chase quick money. They chase long-term leverage. They're willing to accept a lower-paying opportunity if it builds skills. They're willing to delay gratification for momentum, and that patience compounds. Month by month, year by year. This is how savings quietly accelerates life, not dramatically, not overnight, but steadily, until one day you look back and realize the students who saved weren't just protecting themselves, they were positioning themselves. Part 7. The permanent shift. How $10,000 changes a student forever. By the time a student reaches $10,000, something important has already happened. They've stopped seeing money as something that simply disappears every month. They've started seeing it as a tool. Before savings, money feels fragile. Every dollar spent feels like a loss. You're constantly thinking, if I spend this now, it's gone forever. But once you build a financial base, that mindset changes. You begin to understand something most students never learn in school. Money isn't just for consumption, it's for creating options. This is the moment students start thinking differently about their future. Not in vague motivational ways, but in practical ones. They begin asking, how do I make my income more stable? How do I reduce financial stress long term? How do I make my money work with me instead of against me? This is where concepts like investing, side projects, and long-term planning finally make sense. Not because the student suddenly became financially educated, but because they finally have mental space. When you're not worried about survival, curiosity returns. You research instead of panic. You plan instead of react. You think years ahead instead of weeks. And here's the part that surprises most people. A student with $10,000 saved is often closer to financial independence than someone earning twice as much with zero savings. Why? Because wealth isn't built by earning alone. It's built by keeping money. You probably know people who make good money but are always stressed, always broke, always one problem away from panic. Income didn't save them. Discipline did, and reaching $10,000 is proof that discipline exists. It's proof that you can delay gratification, that you can plan, that you can stay consistent even when progress feels slow. Those skills don't disappear, even if life knocks you back, even if savings get wiped out, because the person who built $10,000 once can do it again. That's the real victory, not the number, the capability. This milestone doesn't make you rich, it makes you resilient. It gives you breathing room, and breathing room is where smart decisions are born. You don't become fearless, you become prepared, and prepared people move differently through life. They sleep better, they negotiate better, they choose better. So if you're a student starting from zero, don't feel discouraged. Everyone who reaches $10,000 starts there. Start small, stay consistent, focus on becoming the person who saves. Because the student you become while building your first $10,000 is the student who never truly goes broke again. And once that shift happens, everything changes.